Lee today, CEO of Spark Business Institute. Hi, Patrick.
Hello.
So, Patrick, we have talked a lot on the podcast about how to cultivate vibrant Main Street communities. And we're always looking for subject matter that, helps us to cultivate these communities and to teach our listeners and watchers, what they can do as well. And one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is community gardens.
Yeah, and I like this topic because we spend a lot of time talking about the economics of these local communities and the small businesses on Main Street, and that seems sort of straightforward. But remember, part of this whole thing of the local piece is how it all fits together. The residents, the businesses, the community has that interstitial stuff happening that makes it a community, that gives it a culture, gives it a feel. And community gardens are one of those things that helps fill in that interstitial tissue there, right? Because it has a little bit of an economic impact. It brings folks together. It's a piece that sort of reaches out into various areas of the community and impacts it. And so I think it's very unique. And it's also not something that when you start talking about sustainable local economic communities, I don't think this is probably in the top 20 on anybody's list of things to discuss, right? So community gardens are essentially, they're plots of land. They're usually in urban areas. They're either rented by individuals or groups or organizations for either private gardens or for the benefit of people who are working in the garden. So a lot of times they can be used as one of those communal pieces where some organization has taken a lot, put the garden there, and then given out plots to different folks who apply to do that. And then they grow their stuff there amongst other folks who have plots, and it becomes a very community-based piece. And they also can not just be for where you get vegetables and plants and all, but they can be resources to learn about healthy local food, and they become part of, the sharing economy. So, that making it possible for people to enjoy gardening and do things that they might not afford to on their own, couldn't afford to on their own, or didn't even think about doing on their own, especially in an urban environment, it has a real impact.
Absolutely. In fact, historically, there have been gardens like these, in all different cultures through time. One of the ones that comes to mind for me is during World War II, there were the Victory Gardens, and they were really an important source of food for American families. More recently, these gardens have resurged to mitigate a lot of the effects we see in urban areas of food oases where there isn't access to, fresh produce. And that's made a big difference in their proliferation.
So they act as that oasis pretty much. I think that, the whole concept of healthy food deserts is an interesting concept. And I think it does prove out in certain communities that are underserved in terms of how healthy produce and that type of food actually get into the community. And that sort of points out how it's not just the gardeners who gain from community gardens, right? The benefits extend to the rest of the community and society as well. A lot of the oasis effect of these gardens isn't just the folks who are planting and all, but a lot of times they're taking what they're harvesting, and they're then taking it to a local farmers market. I can't get that. A local farmers market, and they're selling it there too. So then that local food is now being put into the hands of residents. But it also does a whole lot more. It helps improve air and soil quality in the area, right? It increases biodiversity of plants and animals in urban area, and even gives, for birds and other animals that, it's kind of a true desert for them in urban areas. It gives them a place to potentially be. It reduces those food miles that are required to transport produce into urban areas, can replace impervious surfaces and improve water filtration, can reduce neighborhood waste through composting. In a lot of ways, it's just positively impacting, the microclimates in urban areas.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's funny, you don't think about those things, but in order to make a community garden, you have to clear away the debris. You have to rotate the soil. You have to, and you're naturally doing these things that are benefiting them environmentally without, you know, necessarily that being the intended outcome. And we'll talk more about what some of those impacts are environmentally. But I think what's also interesting is the health that it has on the environment in terms of awareness and education. We know that poor nutrition and obesity are both big challenges in low-income neighborhoods. And part of it's an accessibility issue. If you never see a yellow pepper, you know, you don't really know how to cook with a yellow pepper. You're not eating a yellow pepper. So there's education that's involved in this stuff. And again, like we said, it's access, it's improving nutrition, and it's increasing the consumption of fruits and vegetables. So tons of benefits there. And just to reiterate what I just said, but access to fresh foods, improved food security, increased physical activity through working in the garden, maintenance activities to the garden also provide that. Improved dietary habits. And like I said, education, you're learning about some of these things for the very first time. Who knew what rhubarb was? Yeah. Increased fruit and vegetable intake, you know, learning to like different flavor profiles and things that you haven't been exposed to. And, you know, one of the things that I think a lot of us COVID gardeners can attest to is the improved mental health and relaxation that we get from being in the garden. I had never been a gardener prior to COVID, and last year I had a crazy backyard, felt like a farm going with all kinds of cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers. But, you know, being outside and actually cultivating your own food, there's something that's very relaxing and also meditative, I would say. For me, it was a place of meditation.
I was going to say, is there such a term as COVID gardening? I mean, is that a real term, or did we just invent it?
Well, I'm a COVID baker too, so I'm just putting it out there. I wasn't a baker before, but I started baking my own bread in COVID. So I think it is a term.
And it's interesting because that you know, that well-being, the mental health, emotional health, especially during times of COVID. But I think it also has alerted some folks to, you know, even once we get through COVID, you know, this is a way to sort of get out in nature and clear your head and have some positive things happening on a mental health thing. So maybe these habits will go past COVID, and gardening and all will, you know, become something that is a mainstream use for those social ties and for that whole emotional well-being of folks. I knew a couple of folks who took up agriculture. I'm going to say agriculture, not gardening, because they actually took up chickens. And then, you know, they did the whole chicken coop. And then after they did the chicken coop, then they got a little bit braver and they went for some larger animals. And this was all in backyards. Okay. So, you know, I think that this has got people to try things they wouldn't try before. And I think the gardening and the whole agriculture piece may stick. I mean, it saves you some money too. I mean, there's an investment. Don't think it's cheap to garden. There's an investment, but if you cultivate it and keep it going, it eventually pays for itself in a lot of ways. So I think those whole community gardens, like we said, for folks who can't afford it, is providing them that outlet. And it is increasing that feeling of community and those social ties. You're going to interact with folks you may not have ever interacted with on a common ground now that was simply created because you decided to do something different there. And this garden was there and provided that opportunity. These things also do some stuff that's really unexpected. Gardens actually have been shown to reduce crime. And those gardens typically empower residents and allow folks to feel safe in their neighborhoods. They start to know everybody and they know them in a positive light, right? So the gardens in urban areas are absolutely correlated with decreased crime rates. Vacant lands, which these gardens are typically put on, can lead to crime, which obviously detrimentally impacts the community. And they lead to crime. We all know how a vacant lot works, right? There's loitering that happens. You can get off the street where you're not seen. Stuff happens because there's nothing stopping it from happening, right? Nature pours a vacuum. Things happen on these lots. Yeah. And you see, decreased property values because of vacant lots. The drug use can occur there. There's a lot of illegal dumping, litter, you see tires, even chemicals, and they're just eyesores. I mean, the lots are eyesores. So those gardens are improving the economic opportunities by not only the training of the volunteers and the gardeners and the selling food at farmers markets, but it's teaching useful skills. It's increasing property values in the area by making those lots not that eyesore and actually something that is raising the lifestyle, the lifestyle value of that neighborhood.
Yeah. And I think about the self-esteem. I mean, just the empowerment that you're giving people that they, are able to achieve something like creating a garden and working together. Those successful programs always are wrapped around the community involvement in the project and working together to create solutions. And I think that probably has some really positive carryover. Lots of cities and organizations are providing opportunities for residents to become involved with community gardens these days. The USDA has a cooperative state research, education, and extension service, and they're implementing a grant program. So, and what they're finding is they are able to decrease the impact of food deserts in these low-income communities like we're talking about, and provide long-term food security through local agricultural projects. So they're improving the economic, social, and environmental situation in these communities. And there's a host of benefits, some of which we've touched on, but you can't repeat these things too much. They go hand in glove with creating gardens in these kind of urban areas. So beautification of the community, the whole idea of having fresh produce, seeing how it's grown, and that understanding that goes from school-aged children all the way up to the older folks. The healthy lifestyles. It's kind of a model for a healthy lifestyle to get out in the garden and to eat things that are freshly grown and to get exercise and to be outdoors and to feel a peace or an ease. It's very, very, very healthy for them. And then obviously this is going to lead to a cleaner environment because the plants are putting more oxygen into those environments and they're reducing air pollution and runoff. So ultimately you get stronger communities and people can connect with one another and feel more personally invested. And like I was saying, that sense of ownership and community. And that's really where we see the crime reduction. Because if I can talk to you over a garden, I can talk to you about other things that are going on in our neighborhood. That sharing of information and creating of community is so important. And again, the whole educational piece, from the skills that it takes to learn the actual garden, to the environmental issues, to the working business principles, there's a lot to be gained there. And we see this on a micro level in a lot of different areas where they're rolling these types of programs out at schools and within other big places.
And there's another piece that strikes me as I'm even thinking about this, and that is that intergenerational communication, right? You get some younger folks in the garden, you get some older folks in the garden, you get some kids coming to help, and that whole communication that's around something in common that sort of bridges generational divides.
Absolutely. So, Patrick, I know we had talked about a really amazing woman and her efforts out in San Francisco. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Catherine Sneed?
Yeah. So Catherine Sneed was trained in law and agroecology, and back in 1992, she started a program called the Garden Project, and it was specifically designed for crime prevention. And it is very successful. So what she sought to do was to provide training and support for former legal offenders, and an effort to prevent recidivism of, folks who are coming out of jail or prison, and, that a lot of times they end up going back in. So she was trying to attack all that through a garden project. And the project provided both counseling, it provided that continuing education piece we talked about, but it also allowed folks to positively impact their community and the environment. So this program was hailed by the United States Department of Agriculture as one of the most innovative and successful community-based crime prevention programs in the country. Today, the Garden Project is partnered with the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, the San Francisco Police Department, and the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and more than 25 community organizers. And it's empowering at-risk young adults through environmentally based job training and life skills programming while transforming the entire urban environment. So this is not just a concept, our typical community garden, there it is, let's see what it does. This was targeted. This is a targeted project using this methodology to go in and impact very specifically crime rates and recidivism of prisoners. And it is working wonderfully.
She just seems like such an incredible person. Catherine Sneed also has community farms or these types of projects in prison systems. So within the, working with the active jail population. And again, they're just having really terrific results. So there's something about creating a community that grows things together, that really creates common interest and common threads socially.
And nearly every major city and many of the smaller, metropolitan areas are using community gardens to some extent. I think the same way that the farmers markets have really caught on across the country in almost every, city of any size, I think the community gardening piece is starting to catch on at that level too. And I think that it would be interesting for our local communities to look at this not just as a sort of interesting little side piece, but as something that we can use to actually target a lot of the issues that are hitting our communities. As we've discussed throughout this, that it can touch on almost every area, from environmental to health to crime to economics. So why not use the tool?
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a quick shout out to Grow Annapolis, which for the last 11 years in Annapolis has been our community garden here locally, and working with parents, teachers, and schools to put these gardens in our local community schools, as well as benefiting the Eastport United Methodist Church and their food pantry. So even locally right here in Annapolis, we have these types of organizations and making a difference and teaching people about the importance of cultivating these community gardens and this great framework within our urban areas.
And I think that's probably a great spot to sort of wrap up today. I will give a little preview. I think we're going to take this same topic on at a little bit bigger level next week. I had the privilege of working with a man by the name of Tom Hilton, who also ended up working with PBS to produce a special on a book that he wrote called Save Our Land, Save Our Towns. And it takes a very unique approach to what we're talking about here and how you can solve almost all community issues by doing one thing. But to find out what that one thing is, you're going to have to tune in next week.
Oh, we're leaving you with a cliffhanger. That's a first. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today to Reimagining Main Street. I'm Laura Richards, and I'm here with Patrick Lee, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.